Your identity is built on three connected layers: what you consciously choose, what you unconsciously imitate, and what the world quietly expects you to become. Heidegger referred to the third layer as the anyone, not an individual, but a diffuse field of expectation shaping what is normal, desirable, or even thinkable. It isn't simply external pressure, it is the hidden grammar of being human, the background that makes thought, desire, recognition, and belonging possible before you decide who you are. Beneath that grammar lies another voice, a whisper that folds into what you say and what you choose not to say, a pressure you perceive as tact, prudence, or good timing. It sounds private, but it isn't. It is the murmur of life lived together, the tone of a world that teaches you how to appear intelligible to others, and through them, to yourself. This is not a villain to be defeated, it is the atmosphere of meaning. Without it there would be no shared world, only noise. But because it is so close, because it moves through you like breath, you mistake its currents for your own. What follows is an attempt to make that atmosphere visible, to feel the whisper at work, to map the architecture of normal, to glimpse the hive of minds, to trace the tunnel through which meaning travels, and to find, within those conditions rather than beyond them, the light that belongs to you. The whisper is easy to overlook because it comes as a courtesy. You soften a truth, adjust a tone, and hesitate before an awkward point. You call it diplomacy. Yet this form of hesitation isn't created anew with each decision. Its rhythm is familiar, so familiar that you might hear it and think, this is simply me being reasonable. But listen carefully and you'll hear a pattern older than your own life story. Self-doubt feels solitary, but its structure is universal. Similar warnings echo in nearly every gathering. Don't be too forward, don't be odd, don't say the thing that will thicken the air. These cautions have been rehearsed for centuries until they sound like thinking itself. Imagine a corridor of echoes. Each small self-correction leaves a trace. These traces become atmosphere. The atmosphere turns into conscience. What we call introspection can be the memory of others speaking through us, returning in our voice with slightly altered vowels. Heidegger called this diffuse realm das Man, often translated as the anyone. It isn't a person, a committee, or a tyrant. It is the ever-present backdrop that enables coherence. It does not command so much as organize what is considered understandable. When the thought, people will think, passes through your mind, you're already translating from that shared backdrop into personal awareness. That translation is not paranoia. It is ontology, the structure by which human life interprets itself before explicit choosing begins. This is why no one simply steps outside it. The whisper shapes the grammar of everyday life, the conditions under which communication, belonging, and even rebellion make sense at all. You wake and dress, work, and speak within its boundaries, because those boundaries define the world in which choices matter. To live without them would be to drift without coordinates. Authenticity in this context is not about rejecting anyone. It is about refusing to confuse its currents with your entire self. It involves a seeing through and a reclaiming of stance within the already established rhythm. Consider the micro choices of a single day. You speak just enough to be polite, reveal just enough to seem genuine, and doubt just enough to appear reasonable. These gestures don't stem from careful calculation. They originate from long immersion, from tacit alignment with people whose expectations have become second nature to you. This isn't the tyranny of conformity, it's the architecture of intelligibility. Even rebellion occurs here. You define yourself against the background you resist. The wall you push against shapes the push. Shame for breaking an unspoken rule and relief for conforming are not merely moral feelings. They are ontological, a tremor that signals you have slipped out of phase with the pulse that organizes your world. The same current that limits you gives your life a recognizable form. The whisper beneath your thoughts is not an enemy to be silenced. It is a sign of engagement with a shared perspective. The real question, then, is not whether you can avoid anyone, but how you can listen attentively enough to discern when it enhances understanding and when it simply echoes habit. Normality does not begin with decrees. Instead, it forms gradually through repetition, until patterns seem natural. Every greeting, joke, pause, and posture echoes over countless encounters. and these echoes solidify into a framework that feels obvious. You breathe it in every day. It quietly shapes the boundaries of your freedom. Normality isn't a standard printed outside us. It arises from what people constantly do in small, self-reinforcing ways. How we speak, what we reward, what we let slide. It comforts through predictability, but presses because its logic is invisible. What looks like preference often turns out to be consensus, formed by habit, masquerading as instinct. Seen closely, norms are not decisions, but alignments. When laughter echoes at the same cue, when silence falls in mutual understanding, something stabilizes between people. Heidegger called this referral, the way meaning is always passed from one instance to the next. Your handshake refers to a tradition of handshakes. Your apology refers to an established grammar of repair. Meaning circulates through these references, weaving a lattice of roles and behaviors that uphold a recognizable world. This circulation fosters quiet authority. No proclamation is necessary. Deviation results in faint disapproval. The little sting that teaches the cost of falling out of sync. The pressure operates beneath reflection. Each minor adjustment, each act of self-restraint, restores the pattern. This is how anyone sustains their world, through endless micro-corrections that feel voluntary because they arise as what one does. Imagine daily life as a field of constant corrections. Offices find rhythm through unspoken politeness. A shared style of irony reveals who belongs. Emotional restraint becomes currency, shielding vulnerability behind professionalism's calm. None of this is written down, yet all of it guides behavior with uncanny precision. This dance of the tacit shapes entire identities. For Heidegger, this was not merely sociology, but the deeper structure of existence. From tools to language to social roles, things acquire meaning only within networks of use and recognition. A promise, a friend, a home, not abstract definitions but practical commitments. Norms are embedded more deeply than conventions. While conventions can be altered by vote, norms establish the backdrop for judgment, what feels rational, graceful, and trustworthy. Going too far outside them risks becoming unreadable, opaque to the very world that teaches you how to appear. What makes this system unsettling is not malice, but ease. Conformity depends on comfort. Once a pattern feels right, it sustains itself through the relief it provides. Even dissent operates on this terrain. Rebellion defines itself against the very background it opposes. The architecture of normality requires no enforcer. It persists through resonance. You have lived within it long before you named it. It shapes proportion and sincerity, instructs when to speak and when to hold your tongue. Stability is its gift, and the silence of the unknown is its cost. Yet within those rhythms, something else begins to pulse. Belonging deepens into collective thought. The choreography becomes a hum. Minds start to mirror, and the pattern resembles a hive. The Beehive of Minds begins where belonging shifts from comfort to conformity. You feel its pull, the instinct to match pace and pitch, to find the key of the room. Connection relies on this alignment, but the same movement blurs your outline. Togetherness sustains and restricts. It softens isolation while blending differences. You relax in recognition even as you are reshaped by it. Heidegger's point is nuanced. The tendency towards similarity is not a moral failing, but a fundamental aspect of being human. Everyone naturally falls into the habit of imitating and correcting each other. Meaning is maintained through the mutual pull of habits. Similarity is reinforced, divergence is gently discouraged. In this context, conformism is not blind obedience. It is the means by which coherence is established. Each gesture seeks validation in others' eyes, and that validation gradually becomes what feels real. Communication, in this view, functions as a cycle of reassurance. You signal belonging, others affirm it. The sense of reality deepens through echo. Harmony maintains the world's intelligibility. Discord exposes its boundaries. To stand too far outside does not merely invite blame. It endangers understanding itself. People cannot locate you on their map. Digital life amplifies this ancient rhythm. Algorithms speed up imitation. A phrase spreads not through agreement but via momentum. Visibility becomes survival. Repetition indicates presence. You contribute to collective thought and at the same time to your ongoing appearance. I am still here, within the tempo. The hive doesn't need commands. Feedback suffices. Scroll, mirror, respond. The rhythm accelerates until the hive hums in harmony with its reflection. The anxiety that arises is not a modern ailment, but a consequence of participation. You notice how easily your voice merges into a chorus. This reflects the tension between independence and harmony. Too much absorption causes you to disappear. Too much resistance hampers conversation. Social anxiety viewed this way is not solely fear of judgment, but the perceived challenge of being both distinct and connected. Creativity relies on this very friction. You draw from collective language to invent, and each creation subtly rewrites the pattern that made it possible. Authenticity isn't pure originality, it's awareness breaking through reflex, with imitation becoming purposeful. You don't leave the hive, you find a new resonance within it. Yet resonance can harden into repetition. When every signal passes through the same filters, thought becomes circular, and agreement masquerades as truth. Anyone, once a condition of understanding, turns into a mechanism of mimicry. Then a faint memory awakens. Meaning did not originate in the echo. The hive points beyond itself to the structure that enables echoes. At that threshold, a deeper question arises. Not whether you coexist with others, but whether the very space of meaning has been formed before you begin to think. Meaning becomes clearer the moment you notice its boundaries. The tunnel of meaning is not a prison. It is the realization that every act of understanding follows a predefined path. You never chose to enter it. You were born moving within it. Discovery often turns out to be recognition. Your mind tracing grooves carved by countless interpretations before yours. The world's significance isn't reconstructed every morning. It is already woven into everything you encounter. The way you hold a cup, the moral tone you assign to a gesture, the gravity of a word, each belongs to a network of inherited relations. Heidegger called this the referral nexus of significance, a living tissue so continuous that it underpins reality before reflection begins. Meaning doesn't stay still, it flows, gesture to response, object to purpose, self to world. What seems intensely personal is often the quiet hum of social memory moving through your perception. Here lies the paradox. Meaning feels private, yet emerges collectively. You recognize generosity or ambition because the conditions that make them meaningful have been rehearsed over centuries. Emotions and judgments echo earlier worlds. Self-awareness is never solitary. It rekindles shared knowledge, often unconsciously. The tunnel isn't an obstacle to be escaped. It is the very form of recognition. Language holds the tunnel together. Every word bears a lineage. Its meanings were negotiated long before you claim them. But inheritance is not the only constraint. Through limits, language grants intelligibility. It narrows the field so something definite can appear. It is both corridor and light, the shape and the illumination. To speak is to borrow stability from history, while bending that stability towards what must now be said. The irony of introspection is that the deeper you go inward, the more inherited marks you uncover. The tunnel's walls, linguistic, cultural, emotional, outline the boundary of what can be recognizably considered thought. Even the urge to resist anyone follows its own design. Freedom does not hover outside, it needs a footing, and that footing is provided by the very structures you might wish to escape. Awareness, however, begins to expand the passage. When you understand how every idea passes through shared frameworks, you stop mistaking inscriptions for scenery. You start to interpret them. Authenticity is not an escape route, but a recovered direction. Heidegger's account doesn't ask you to escape the social world. It asks you to consciously appropriate it, to take up what has already been handed down and make it your own. Seen this way, identity is not a hidden core waiting to be uncovered. It is a negotiation between inheritance and possibility. The tunnel does not end outside history. It passes through history's depths. Each choice of tone or value becomes a subtle reshaping of inherited meaning. Independence grows not by erasing the background, but by perceiving its rhythm clearly and responding with care. From that clarity, a new uncertainty emerges. If every thought is shaped, what remains that is truly yours? The question is not a plea for escape, it is an invitation to a different kind of authorship. As the noise of conflicting demands fades, a calmer awareness emerges, a beginning of a light that is yours. It isn't a sudden revelation, it is recognition. You can face the world's structures without surrendering to or fleeing from them. Authenticity is created, not discovered. You navigate between two comforts, compliance and resistance. Alignment feels secure, defiance feels genuine. When left unchecked, both create distance from your true self. Heidegger distinguishes this difference through ownership. Disowned existence drifts within inherited routines. Self-owned existence assumes responsibility for these routines and transforms them into expressions. The change is subtle but profound. To drift is to be spoken by others. To own your life is to talk through it. This reorientation appears unremarkable from the outside. You still perform your roles, but with a different grip. The world often rewards those who move in harmony with it. Belonging provides relief. However, the cost of effortless belonging is erosion. You can forget where your gestures start. Conversely, rebellion can disguise dependence. It defines itself by opposition rather than insight. Both are reactions. Neither signifies ownership. Living authentically means embracing what already flows through you. Language, ritual, culture, and handling it consciously. You don't silence anyone, you learn to modulate it. The practice begins with small gestures, a pause that signals thought, a refusal to perform cynicism you don't believe, a choice to withhold what would only earn applause. Outwardly, little changes. Inwardly, everything shifts. A familiar act becomes an interpretation rather than a reflex. Authenticity is more like craftsmanship than emancipation. A craftsperson doesn't abandon tools because they resist. Instead, they incorporate their resistance into their style, much like with the inherited grammar of life. You discover its grain, make your cuts with and against it, and the work gains a coherence that feels earned rather than imposed. Balance, not purity, becomes the mark of authorship, a sustained awareness that lets you belong without fading away. Light enters through fractures once mistaken for failure. The tension between duty and desire, expression and restraint. Those very tensions become channels of illumination. The self reveals itself not as a single smooth essence, but as a structure practiced at holding contradiction. You don't abolish the hum of anyone. You trace its contours until your inflection appears within it. Agency then is not volume but modulation, the shift from echoing to interpreting. In digital culture where algorithms reward mimicry, this is a quiet act of defiance. Reflection transforms repetition into meaning. Instead of seeking a mythical outside, you nurture an inside that can genuinely engage with the world. Acting this way is a humble form of enlightenment. You no longer seek light beyond the tunnel of meaning. Instead, you shape light within it. Constraint becomes the medium. Context becomes the palette. The glow you perceive ahead is not escape, but clarity. Existence has always been a shared endeavor, and the task is to inhabit it consciously. As that light becomes steady, you start to see its source differently. It flows through language, through the voices that spoke before you, through histories woven into every phrase. The voice you call your own has always carried the weight, and sometimes the wisdom, of the many. Ownership doesn't erase that inheritance, it channels it. Awareness becomes ownership. What moves through you need not decide you. You can distinguish repetition from intention, inheritance from authorship. The anyone still hums, but you learn the key and choose your tone. Your gestures, words, and judgments only gain substance when you deliberately adopt them. Identity stops being merely an echo and becomes interpretation, not a sharp division from the world, but a familiar conversation with it. In that conversation, the light that belongs to you is not a spotlight that isolates you from others. It is a steady lamp you hold inside the tunnel, enough to see the path, enough to step carefully, enough to write your part in a language shared with everyone but belonging to no one. That is the promise of authenticity in Heidegger's sense. Not a retreat from the human crowd, but a more direct way of walking among it. Awake to the whisper, conversant with the architecture, attuned to the hive, lucid in the tunnel, and quietly responsible for the light you bring to the world you inherit.